Greetings. My name is Walter Wilson, and this presentation is about Alfred Plumb. It was created as part of a history PhD class assignment and has been modified for the Waynesboro Heritage Foundation. So, the assignment was to analyze one person's experience in the postbellum economy, and I've chosen as my subject Al Plumb, Waynesboro, Virginia businessman and farmer. Um, I have a few sources that I have looked at for this assignment. One is a book about the mid 19th century plains area where there were land grants and farms were developed by people who obtained land grants. And we're going to see that's going to be different than how most of the uh, Virginia farms in the mid 1800s transferred. I have also looked at some of the information in the history of Waynesboro, and the last source there is Bureau of Statistics. I'm going to talk about a little bit about how many farmers there were and compared to non-farmers. The other two, Plum House Restoration Committee and the Plum article that was produced by John and Sarah and Margaret, the family members of the Plum family. So those are not published, but visit the Plum House and you are welcome to read them. So the Plum family, to give you an idea, they came over as typical 1800 family. Alfred Plumb, who was a copperplate printer in England, he came over into the Philadelphia area where a lot of immigrants landed. This was in 1826. He eventually moved to Richmond, and then over the mountain, he came to Waynesboro to establish a tavern. The tavern was right downtown on Main Street in Waynesboro. He bought a house in 1836, which is the Plum House that we refer to today. It was built somewhere around 1804, and that makes it the oldest wooden house in Waynesboro. His oldest son, Al, he acquired ownership of the house and farm in 1859. As I said, a lot of families in Virginia, 1718s, early 1900s, properties were passed down to the future generations. Now, the Plum House was eventually lived in by 5 different generations of the Plums, with the last one moving to Florida in 1994 and selling the house to the city. It is now a museum. So I have a picture for you taken April 3rd of 2021 showing the exterior of the front of the house. This is right on Main Street. And of course, you can see now that there's a commercial building to the right, a commercial building to the left, and the white structure that you see behind this house, I have another picture later, it has been moved closer to the house as right now there's very little property left of the original farming property. So after the postbellum period, and then throughout, as the Plums have put in their family history, throughout the 1880s and 1890s, this house was used. It was a farming activity, working farm with cows and chickens, slaughterhouse, etc. Um, they raised pigs and chickens in a barn in the back of the house, where they also operated a slaughterhouse. And then they had a number of chickens and they sold those chickens. And what makes that interesting is what I'm about to talk to you about, how Mr. Plum kept track of that. But first, let me just show you. This is from the Census Bureau showing you statistics of the farm and the non-farm um, residents in the U.S. At the time in the 1860s, it was about 6 million to 4 million farm versus non-farm. 1880 is the first time that we see a larger number of non-farmers. So the farming business, of course, in Virginia is still very prevalent. If anybody's driven around out in the country, they will see farms. This farm, of course, is no longer in operation, but at the time, it was a very large operation. Here's a picture from inside of the house of a wardrobe. Now, the wardrobe is not original. The two doors on it, though, were found upstairs in the Plumb house, and this wardrobe was built so that the doors could be displayed. The items inside the wardrobe are period pieces from the families uh, live there. Um, but what's interesting is the notations on the doors. So here is the right door. And if you look close, you can see a lot of etchings, scratchings. Um, but Mr. Plumb kept track of his business on the back of these doors. Here's the left door, and you can see a bunch of tick marks where he kept track of whatever he was doing, whether it was selling chickens or what have you, in the different operations of his farming business. Here is transcription of what's on part of the door. You can see in the 1880s, he didn't sell a lot of chickens, but there he did sell some. Remember, he did have a slaughterhouse business um, in the backyard as well. And you can see here he kept track of other things like when he put the cow in the neighbor's pasture and paid 75 cents for it. Um, so a few more pictures just to give you an idea of the house itself. Here's a picture from the east side looking towards the house on the right. Now the summer house that you see on the left there, that has been moved in quite close to the house because it was much further back. The courtyard there of bricks was built about 1850s, and it appears that they hired somebody else's slaves to do the work. It's not known that they had slaves, but they do think that a few slaves did build this patio in the 1850s. And there's one more picture, just shooting between the house and the summer house to the make believe uh, outhouse that has been built, just to give you a little perspective of the living that people had in the 1800s. That is not the original outhouse, but it gives you the idea. Here's one more picture from the inside showing that wardrobe. And what I've done is I've drawn circles around two items on that door to the left of it. This door faces the west towards Waynesboro High School, which is about 100 yards away. And that is where the Union troops set up with the Battle of Waynesboro. And those two spots are shrapnel coming through the door, and they were left there um, from that battle, which took place in the very end of the war, and it was the last really battle in the Shenandoah Valley area. Unfortunately for Early and his Confederates, well, Early escaped, but the 1,200 or so Confederates were all captured in like 20 minutes. So I thank you for listening to this, and just wanted to give a perspective of Al Plumb and his farming business. And it's not uncommon for that time period in Virginia where farmers, well, in many cases, were farmers before the war, such as my three-time great-grandfather, who did go off and fight in the war. And when he went back home to Floyd County, he became a farmer again for a few more decades, which was very common for the farmers at that time. If you have the time, please visit. The Plumb House is at 1012 West Main Street in Waynesboro. And then just down the street at 420 West Main Street is the Waynesboro Heritage Museum. I wish you well. Thank you for listening.